Many of us don't want summer to end. But oftentimes in the middle of it, we wonder if we're doing summer well. That's kind of a pressure that some parents feel. And it can be a really dark place. But today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in our daily segment, Facing the Dark, we're going to specifically have a time of reflection on how we're doing this summer. And Dr. Kathy's going to give us some insight on how we can do summer well, so to speak, as for some of us, we're entering that midway point. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark, be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, a recent article in Deseret News outlines how parents of kids with ADHD can help them thrive in the summer. They said establishing routines is really important, and that in order to do that, kind of preparation is the key. They said parents should set long-term goals to provide a sense of direction for their kids. They go on even to highlight in this article how parents can kind of utilize rewards and natural consequences. Helping their kids achieve goals through incentives is really helpful, but those incentives need to be obtainable and reachable. So, Dr. Kathy, I'd like to hear you kind of explain this or maybe outline this.
Yeah, this is a great topic. Kids who are diagnosed with ADHD, OCD, any of what I call the dangerous Ds, benefit from routine. They do benefit from, in the school year, a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And some parents may find that on Saturdays, their kids are a bit harder to control. And that's because everything from what they do and when they do it, what they eat, when they eat is different. So the summer can be really challenging for these kinds of kids. So I want to say to anybody listening with a special needs child, hopefully you have figured out that they do benefit from knowing in advance. So maybe on a Tuesday night, you say, hey, by the way, on this Saturday is when we go to Grandma and Grandpa's apartment and we're going to go to the zoo. And you begin giving them something to anticipate, which is joy, right? Like when I send a gift to someone, I often shoot them a text and say, hey, watch your mailbox. Because I swear part of the joy is expecting something in the mail. And I think for our kids, they need to know that there's something to look forward to, whether it's a visit at grandma, going to the zoo, or daddy's going to bring home a new board game and teach it just to me tonight. So there is a benefit of expecting. There is a benefit of some plans. And I think especially if we allow the kids to participate in that. What do you hope to accomplish in the month of July? And if the ideas are realistic, then have them watch you write it on the calendar. And if it's not realistic because of time, resources, whatever, then you help your 7-year-old or your 17-year-old understand that, hey, our cousins are able to do that this year. We're not, and we're going to do this instead.
I think that's really great to think through setting expectations and working through that. Every summer we create a summer bucket list in our house. And over the course of summer, inevitably, things change in our family. So an example would be like we had a screen-free June is what we set up with the kids, but essentially that lasted a week because we got 3 days of continual rain and we became lazy as parents. So last week we kind of refocused and reset, and now we're having screen-free July, and our kids are like, oh, sure, that's going to happen. But we're working on it, right? We're kind of going through this. It felt like a failure, but we're really pushing through. What do you think that kids kind of learn when parents maybe kind of reset on things like this? How can parents kind of think well about even having a point of resetting in summer?
I think to show kids that plans don't always work out, but we're not giving up is super helpful. We have to teach our kids that, yeah, life does happen, and there are legitimate reasons for changing our plans and illegitimate reasons for changing our plans. And let's admit to one or the other. Maybe, again, we consult with the kids and we tell them we're going to start over and here's why. So I'm not sure if it's, failure or if it's just the way that life happens. I think showing them we push through, that's part of resiliency, starting again, starting over, not being defined by failure, not giving up. If it was a good idea for June, it's a good idea for July. I would say to you and your lovely wife that maybe it's realistic to think of 5 days out of 7 are screen-free, or 7 great days of no complaining and no obnoxious, whiny behavior. And you play nice and you get vitamin D and whatever. And then maybe we reward you. I don't know. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the right way either. But I would say if kids are addicted and if kids are used to having fun by themselves or with a peer, even with a sibling, doing something with tech, even if it's a healthy use of tech, then maybe it's okay to intersperse a little bit of it. And that would help you and your wife not feel so bad if you don't make it through 30 days in a row. That's my, off the top of my head, gut response to that. I love that you want to do it. Love that you want to do it. Every family should use less tech than they're currently using. I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, I think that's really something that we've kind of aspired for. And probably it's partly because I think that a lot of the parents that I talk to have this dream for kind of routine, and especially in summer, because we kind of break all habits of school and then everything kind of gets thrown up in the air, right? But for many of us, I think that we kind of feel sometimes knocked down by the fact that it's really hard to set rhythms and habits and routines. And so maybe you could give some encouragement to those of us who have been struggling with this. How do we kind of maybe establish a plan to kind of work together for this? And what should be some of those things for kids that we should implement to have a plan for the last month or two here that we have of summer? What would be some things that you would want us to highlight or say we should highlight as we look at the kind of final 2 months of summer here?
Yeah, I love this. And it's a really important topic because parents may be the type of people who benefit from routine. Totally legit. And again, some kids are. And so if you realize that there's more whiny behavior, more criticism, more of just a less of an agreeable spirit, more disagreeable spirit, if you will, more anxiety and stress, then maybe this is why. And maybe we set a calendar and it's on the fridge or the bulletin board. And we read every morning at 9 as a family. And we do an hour, like a lot of parents do, an hour of reading, an hour of outdoor play, an hour of some type of new learning, like a new recipe or a new game, and then you're allowed screen time. Even that kind of a routine where you establish those kinds of rhythms for kids, I think is really good. Here's what I would say going into the kind of the end period here. Prioritize the awakening and strengthening of the 8th grade smarts. If you're familiar with the book I wrote about the 8 smarts, you know that awakening them early is best for our kids, and then keeping them alive is super helpful. So have you in the summer, have you used your word smart with words? Have you used logic smart? Have you been thinking? Have you been picture smart with your kids and drawing and looking at designs and going to an art museum and going to a bookstore and finding the best children's literature illustrated book that you can find? Are you music smart? Have you gone to a concert? Have you gone to a city square, Oompa band kind of a thing, if you live where that kind of a thing happens? Have you had your body smart activities at the park? Have you done your nature smart? And have you looked for ladybugs and looked at leaves? And have you been to the, botanical garden this summer? Have you been people smart, where you're learning about how people think and how people operate and how people are differently motivated? And are you giving your kids self-smart time of being quiet and reflective and honoring their own thoughts? Keeping the 8 smarts alive in the summer is super important, along with applying last year's learning. One of the most important things to do as we ramp up for a new academic year, whether you homeschool or send your kids off to school, is review what we did last year, hoping that it stays more current for the upcoming year. So do real math at the grocery store. Do real reading by having them write letters to first responders and the nurses at grandmother's nursing home, and have them use fractions and recipes. And those kinds of things seem somewhat simple, but all of that is really good. And you don't have to say to the kids, we're going to learn something today. You can just have a good time. But what you're doing as the parent, the grandparent, is establishing that rhythm of using old information in the lives so that we benefit.
Every time Dr. Kathy mentions the 8th grade smarts, I feel like I should start taking notes. There's dynamics of it and aspects of it that I think I really want to understand and kind of commit to memory. And it's something that I think the psalmist was also mindful of in Psalm 28. And I'm going to begin reading at verse 6. And this is what David writes. Blessed be the Lord, for he has heard the voice of my pleas for mercy. The Lord is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts, and I am helped. My heart exalts, and with my song I give thanks to him. The Lord is the strength of his people. He is the saving refuge of his anointed. Oh, save your people and bless your heritage. Be their shepherd and carry them forever. I love Psalm 28, 6-9. Partly because of Psalm 28, 1-5. Because in those passages, David is calling for the Lord to understand him, to not be deaf or silent in David's cries and calls for the Lord to recognize him. He talks about not wanting to be dragged off with the wicked or to go down into the pit. And he has this phrase in verse 5 that says, because they do not regard the works of the Lord or the work of his hands, he will tear them down and build them up no more. That passage is a really interesting linchpin in all of Psalm 28. And I think it's a linchpin for us as we look at this time in caring for the kids around us, because it's easy for us to maybe forget the work of the Lord and instead to kind of focus a little bit on ourselves, rather than taking the time now in this linchpin in summer to remember the strength of the Lord, that he is our shield, and that he really is the strength of his people. And as Psalm 28 verse 9 says, that God is the shepherd of his people and he will carry them forever. And I think remembering that the Lord is our shepherd guiding us through can give us confidence to live into these moments and lead our families well. And that will be a bright light for our community that will cut through all of the darkness. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in our daily segment, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender, and I'm thankful that you're joining us this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.